Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's in-person appearance at the Group of Seven summit in Hiroshima last month underscored the urgency of Ukraine's plight as its people continue to persevere and prevail over Russia's ruthless military campaign. Accordingly, bilateral summit talks between Korea and Ukraine on the margins of the G7 meeting saw President Zelenskyy promising his Ukrainian counterpart additional aid in the form of non-lethal support to address some of the more immediate hardships. So what has been the broader impact of the war on ordinary Ukrainians? How is humanitarian aid from the international community supporting Ukraine? And what are some of the priorities in post-war efforts in Ukraine? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. It's been over a year since the start of Kremlin's war against Kyiv, and Ukrainians continue to stand strong in their defense of their land. That being said, today I speak with the Ukrainian Ambassador here in Korea for his thoughts on Ukraine's plight at present. Ambassador Dmytro Ponomarenko, that is. It's a pleasure, Ambassador, to have you on the show.
Pleasure is mine as well.
Right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Ambassador Ponomarenko, let's begin then with the situation in Ukraine as it seeks to defend its territory against Russian invasion.
As you know, Russia failed to reach its strategic objectives of occupying entire Ukraine as they planned previously and destroying Ukraine's statehood and erasing Ukrainian identity. So Russia retains its maximalist goal and hopes to turn the tide in the protracted war of attrition, counting on mass mobilization, war fatigue, and nuclear blackmailing. And they have wasted hundreds of thousands of its troops as a cannon fodder on the battlefield. But the only place in which it's still trying to advance now is Bakhmut, which is a small city in eastern Ukraine in which it's used as tactics, scorched earth tactics. But the city of Bakhmut fulfilled its main task already, so to exhaust the enemy as much as possible. And during more than 10 months of fighting for Bakhmut, the Russian invaders suffered over 100,000 casualties. So Ukrainian defenders for this year liberated nearly half of the area occupied by Russian troops since the start of the full-scale military invasion, and this process will continue until they complete the occupation of our sovereign territory within the internationally recognized borders. And the preparation for ongoing new counteroffensive, Ukraine's new counteroffensive is going on. So the direction and time of this counteroffensive will be determined by the military command and in due time. So as you saw from the last news, the pro-Ukrainian coalition in the world remains strong and consolidated. And during the President Zelenskyy visit to several European countries like Italy, Germany, Great Britain, France, which took place 2 weeks ago, significant military support was confirmed by the leading European states, United States, Great Britain, France, Netherlands, and the others agreed to work on the creation of so-called coalition of fighter jets. And on the 19th of May last week, during the G7 plus Ukraine summit, the world leaders confirmed their commitment to stand together with Ukraine's against Russia illegal and unjustifiable and unprovoked war of aggression, as well as to provide the financial, humanitarian, military, and diplomatic support to our country. And continuation of timely military and technical assistance from our partners is needed to end the war until the end of this year. We hope to end the war until the end of this year, 2023. So there can be no artificial restrictions on such assistance. So long-range missiles, modern combat aircraft, and additional heavy weaponry and air defense systems remain critical for ensuring Ukraine's successful counterattacks.
And against that backdrop, Ambassador, what can you share with us about the lives of ordinary people there, as their soldiers, of course, seek to protect their land?
Yes. In revenge for its military losses on the ground, Russia continues terrorizing Ukrainian civilians, the civilian population. And the number of civilian infrastructure facilities which was damaged or destroyed by Russia has exceeded hundreds of thousands of objects. It includes like tens of thousands of residential buildings, educational and medical institutions, cultural, religion buildings, and definitely the main targets is the water and electricity networks. So these numbers do not exclude the temporarily occupied areas or territories, which is now under control of Russian forces. And the level there is much higher. And Ukraine is one of the most mined countries in the world today. So about 30% of Ukraine's territory remain dangerous because of enemy mines and unexplosive ordnance. So currently the Ukrainian government is implementing a plan for priority demining of agricultural land. And environmental damage in Ukraine caused by Russia's war is estimated it's coming to 50 billion United States dollars. So Russia continues committing war crimes and violating the humanitarian law in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. So reproducing the same pattern as it has been using in Crimea previously and parts of Donbass in 2014, such as appoints occupational administration, imposes Russian passports and legislation, and Russian occupiers introduce education in Russian and according to the Russian standards, as well as enact measures aimed at undermining and erasing Ukrainian cultural identity and actually militarizing the Ukrainian children through the installation of military kind of patriotic educational programs and military camps. So Russia as an occupying power conducts the forced conscription of Ukrainian citizens in the temporarily occupied parts of Ukraine. And the mobilization campaign in Crimea targets especially Crimean Tatars and the peoples who is not loyal towards the occupational administration. So this is a daily life on the territories which is occupied now by Russia.
Right, I see. Ambassador Ponomarenko, aside from his trips to the West, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy recently made a surprise in-person attendance at the G7 summit in Hiroshima, that's neighboring Japan. Could you tell us a bit more about the background behind this welcomed visit?
As you know, before coming to Hiroshima, Japan President Zelenskyy visited several countries in Europe and Middle East, and the main purpose of which was to garner support for our defense and as well for the peace formula initiative proposed by the president at the G20 summit last year. So formula's main goal is to deprive Russia of its tools to commit the crime of aggression against Ukraine and to restore Ukraine's territorial integrity and to guarantee security and justice for the entire international community. So it remains only a realistic and comprehensive plan to achieve this goal. So support for the peace formula was confirmed by the EU as well as the leadership of Italy, France, Japan, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Netherlands, Germany, you name it, and many other countries. And President Zelensky's participation in the Arab League summit in Jeddah, as well as his meetings with the leaders of South Korea, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Australia during the G7 summit in Hiroshima gave a tangible, positive impetus to the implementation of the peace formula. And at the G7 summit in Hiroshima, President Zelenskyy proposed holding a global peace summit in July to promote the peace formula under the auspices of the United Nations. So the leaders of G7 clearly noted that the peace formula proposed by Ukraine can be only be Ukrainian. So, but we know that China, Brazil, and the number of African countries have expressed their readiness to help overcome this crisis provoked by Russia's war against Ukraine and to end this war. And as Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, which is now on his trip around the African countries, said that we are ready to discuss any peace initiative that respects two principles. First, it should not suggest territorial concessions. And second, it should not lead to a frozen conflict instead of peace. So proposals that fully comply with these principles can be discussed with a view to their implementation in the peace formula proposed by Ukrainian side.
Right. And Ambassador, against the backdrop of such efforts to ensure a peace plan for Ukraine, we, as you mentioned, President Zelenskyy and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy held a meeting on the margins of the G7 gathering to address the situation in Ukraine and, of course, Korea's humanitarian support for the country. That being said, what can you tell us about the importance of such humanitarian assistance for your country?
We are sincerely grateful to our friends and allies for the security and humanitarian assistance that we receive. And we thank namely Republic of Korea and its people for their solidarity with us and for the support. And last year, Korean government provided Ukraine with 100 million in aid, which includes medicine and medical equipment, computers, ambulances, pickup trucks, protective gear, generators, mini excavators, etc. And in this regard, it should also be mentioned that we felt support not only from the government, not only from Korean government, but from the private sector, NGO, and ordinary citizens of your country. So for this year, the government of Republic of Korea announced the allocation of 130 million of humanitarian aid to Ukraine, $1 million, which is very important to us amid the urgent need for demining. As I said, that Ukraine is mostly mined territory in the world. and demining energy and medical equipment, armored ambulances, fire engines, and medicines, which is very important for us for the time being. And during the meeting in Hiroshima last week, President Zelenskyy and President Yoon agreed on additional non-lethal aid from the Republic of Korea to be provided to Ukraine in the near future. First of all, we are talking about modern demining machinery, in dire need of which Ukraine is right now, since, as I mentioned, almost 30% of our territory has been mined and littered with the vast amounts of explosive ordnance left by the invaders. And according to the World Bank estimations, the complete set of humanitarian demining works will cost about $40 billion, and the need for current year alone amount to 400 million. So taking into account the unprecedented scale of this problem, we look forward to the support of the international community and Korea, and President mentioned it as one of the priority during his meeting with the President Yoon. So we need, for this year, we need over 100 special mechanical demining vehicles to speed up demining time and ensure maximum safety. And we hope that Korean manufacturers like Hyundai or Hanwha will be able to quickly produce these machines and supply them to us, and possibly consider the possibility of localization of its production in Ukraine, since it's critical for us to have a Ukrainian manufacturer for this production, or a joint venture.
Right, of course. Ambassador, during their summit, Presidents Yoon and Zelenskyy also talked about a potential post-war rebuilding effort between the two countries. That being said, what role do you suppose Korea could play in post-war Ukraine?
The joint assessment released by the Ukrainian government and the World Bank Group and the European Commission and the other think tanks estimate that the cost of the reconstruction and recovery in Ukraine has grown to from 5 to 700 billions, so US dollars. In 2023, Ukraine will need about 15 billion for critical and priority reconstruction and recovery investments to rebuild the infrastructure critical infrastructure which was damaged by the missiles attack, and Ukraine has already started to rebuild without waiting for the war to end. And Ukraine's recovery program will be the largest reconstruction project since the World War II. And considering the high level of expertise of Korean companies in the implementation of infrastructure projects, we hope for their active participation in the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. And the government of Ukraine is ready to provide the most lucrative conditions for the reconstruction-related investment. And one of the main, pillars of Ukraine's recovery is principles of build back better. That means that to recover better than it was before. So in this context, our goal is not only to restore facilities that have been destroyed by Russian invasion, but to build a new and modern, innovative economy with the use of best world practices in the area of development, which is Korea companies is experienced in. So we look forward to expanding our cooperation on the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine's infrastructure through loans of the Economic Development Cooperation Fund with the EDCF, with the Official Development ODA program. And we also propose to foreign countries to take patronage over the regions, cities or industries affected by the war and rebuild them. And it's it is a practice already. And I know that during the meeting of the First Lady with the President Yoon, she proposed for Korea to choose the Kherson region or Nikolaev region as a region which you can contribute to the post-war recovery. And we invite Republic of Korea to join this initiative.
Right, Ambassador, and speaking about the Ukrainian First Lady, Olena Zelenskaya was here in Seoul, and she invited President Yoon and First Lady Kim Gon-hee to Ukraine. That being said, what do you suppose would be the broader implications of a visit by the Korean President and his wife to Ukraine?
The visit of the President of the Republic of Korea to Ukraine would become the first visit of Korean leader to Ukraine since the independence. And we think if President Yoon decided to visit Ukraine, it will be a powerful signal of support of peace in Ukraine that is currently defending the global values of democracy and freedom, and Korea as a global pivotal state, and as the President Yoon mentioned, as a compass for democracy, so should to be kind of leading this process. And we highly appreciate this visit of the President Yoon to Ukraine, and that's why the First Lady and the President invited the President Yoon to visit Ukraine on his convenience in near future. And the visit would also take the bilateral cooperation in trade, in humanitarian and cultural spheres to higher level, and enhance realization of numerous projects, of course, including the rebuilding of Ukraine.
Right, of course, the rebuilding after the war. All right, Ambassador Dmytro PONOMARENKO, thank you so much for making time to speak with us today.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Issues and Insiders. And we end with our prayers to all those who have been affected by the atrocities taking place in Ukraine. Thank you for watching.